Hi everyone, my name is Kamsari. I'm one of the monks from the Happy Jiva team. Welcome to our session today. Today's topic is a bit about the mind and how restless and uncontrollable it is, and how through mantra meditation we'll be able to control the mind. But other than what we've been discussing in the previous sessions, I thought we'd go into a bit more details, a bit about how the mind and the senses cooperate with each other and how they work, and how mantra meditation is used to be able to subdue the mind and help us go beyond the mind and the body and more into the spiritual platform and dealing with the self. So we're referring from the Bhagavad Gita today, the prime yoga text. We're going to talk a bit about how the main protagonist of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, and Krishna, his teacher, how they discuss a bit about the mind and how to control it. So in today's session, we're going to read from this chapter 6, text number 34. I'll just read the translation. The mind is restless and turbulent, obstinate and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So this is Arjuna speaking to Krishna, his teacher. So Arjuna is the student and Krishna is the teacher here. And Arjuna is just clarifying with his teacher, because this whole 6th chapter, Krishna's talked about the yoga system and how to sit and how to practice it, how to do the pranayam, how to do the asanas, and how to go more detailed into controlling the mind and senses. So here Arjuna is clarifying with Krishna that I think the mind is a bit more restless and turbulent. It's very hard to control. So Arjuna is laying down the facts here, making it easier for us also, because he's referring the problem to an expert teacher, Krishna, who is the master of all types of yoga. So Krishna is going to clarify. I'll come to that very soon. He's going to answer Arjuna's question. But this particular verse, where he understand how the mind sometimes becomes more stronger than our intelligence. And we experience that in our lives very, very often, if not every single day, at least once in a lifetime. We see how our mind overcomes our intelligence when we come to decisions, when it comes to thoughts, when it comes to wanting to meditate and sit down and focus. We can understand that the mind travels from here and all the way to the other side of the globe very easily. It's a very difficult thing to control. And the example given here is that Arjuna thinks that controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. So you can understand to control the wind is most difficult, what to speak of controlling the mind. So the mind in the yoga text is considered to be a 6th sense. So we have the 5 senses. That's our eyes, our nose, our tongue, our skin, and our ears. So we're dealing with these 5 senses. And each of these senses, they're connected to the mind. The mind is kind of like the headquarters. And these senses, they're considered to be like knowledge acquiring senses. That means that they gather the information. So like here we're sitting in a park in Dabo. So the eyes, they immediately grab onto different things. So you can see birds, you can see the clouds, you can see the grass around me. And hearing, you can also hear me. And if you're lucky, you can even hear the birds around me. And same thing with the skin. It's a bit chilly, so you can feel that. And so on and so forth. Touch and the taste is there as well. So all of these senses, they're constantly gathering information and they're being processed by the mind. And the nature of the mind is to accept or reject based on our intelligence or knowledge. So for example, I'm sitting here and I'm smelling a fragrance of flowers. So the tendency of the mind would be, where's the flower coming from? So it's immediate acceptance of that information. So like that, when we sit down to meditate or when we practice mantra meditation in a group, like kirtan for example, or in our daily lives when we focused on a particular activity, our senses sometimes drag us away from what we want to do in life. And here in the purport, it's mentioned here that the mind, it's supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. In other words, the intelligence should be able to control the mind. But in a practical world, we see it's not the case. So how do we actually control the mind? How do we bring it back? I'll come to that. First, I wanted to explain a bit more about the connection between the mind and the senses. The example is given in the yoga texts of a chariot. So in other words, a cart. We're all familiar with a horse-drawn cart. So a cart that has 5 horses drawing it or tied to it. It has a driver holding onto the reins of the horses, and it also has the passenger sitting in the back seat. So the example is given of this particular chariot with 5 horses. So you can see that these 5 horses, they represent the different senses. So the touching and the seeing, the smelling, hearing, so on and so forth. And then you see the driver there in blue, and he's holding the chariot with his reins. The yoga text specifically mentioned that the driver is our mind. Rather, the instrument to hold the horses is the mind, and the intelligence is what's holding on to it. And then you have the passenger sitting in the back seat. For the sake of today's discussion, I wanted to explain a bit more about how the mind deals with the senses, because this is a very crucial topic. Because if you understand how this works, then it's very easy to be able to neglect or ignore the mind's rampant sort of bombarding of thoughts upon us when we perform our meditation or our daily activities. So here I'll quickly quote from the yoga text, this particular section, that the individual is a passenger of the car, of the material body, the intelligence is the driver, mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. So the mind is the driving instrument. The yoga texts also give an example of how each of our senses, specifically in this human body, are highly attuned. They're the best of what you can get even in other species of life. Like, for example, dogs. Dogs, their sense of smell is very strong, but their eyesight isn't that great. In fact, many people have told, and you can actually see, that the dog's eyesight is black and white. You can also understand their hearing is very acute. They can hear someone approaching the property from a very, very far distance, and they can immediately pick it up and alert the homeowner. But their eyesight isn't as great as the rest of their senses. Similarly, we have other examples given in the yoga texts, and I'll go through them one by one. For the sight, for the eyes, we have the moth. The example is given that the moth's eyesight is very powerful. It can perceive things very quickly, very easily. But when there's a bright light or a fire, for example, the moth is immediately attracted to it. So that very sense that is meant to be the, I guess, the benefit of having that particular body of a moth becomes its own downfall. So similarly, for the sense of taste, the fish immediately tastes or senses the worm on a hook, and for the want of enjoying the taste of a worm, it immediately grabs onto the worm on the hook and bites onto it, but then gets stuck in the hook, and in that process it gets killed. So again, another example is the sense of smell. The honeybee or the bee. The yoga text explained that a lotus flower is very fragrant, and it opens up during the night time. So when the bees come and collect the honey from the lotus flower or the pollen, then they get intoxicated by it. And what happens is that they don't realize that the sun is going to come up and that the lotus is going to close. Another similar example is of a fly catcher. When the fly comes in smelling the particular fragrance from a flycatcher, immediately the fly gets in and the flycatcher closes its lid and the fly gets stuck inside and dies. So another example for another sense, for example for hearing, the example is given of a deer. That the deer, being enchanted by the music of a hunter, becomes stunned. And the ordinarily agile deer, which can escape the hunter, becomes stunned and immediately becomes caught by that hunter. And finally, we have the sense of, so we've gone through the sense of seeing, we've gone through the sense of smelling, we've gone through the sense of hearing, tasting, and now it's the sense of touch, the skin. The yoga texts give the example of the elephant. The elephant, if a hunter wants to catch an elephant, the process given is that it will show a female elephant to the male one. And seeing the female elephant, the male will immediately try and approach the female elephant for contact, for sensual contact. So the hunter, what it does, he or she puts down a trap before the she-elephant and has the she-elephant stationed there. And when the male elephant sees the female elephant there, it will come slowly rushing towards, and finally comes towards rushing the female elephant for contact. And not seeing that there was a hole covered by grass in front of it, it falls down and becomes captured. So these examples are given in the yoga text to explain that even though a person may be expert in controlling the senses and the mind, if just one sense goes out of control, then it becomes a complete waste. It becomes a failure, because the mind immediately becomes pulled away from the meditation, pulled away from the focus of the meditator. So the mind is a very tricky thing, and it's connected to the senses in this way. But just as Arjuna has asked this question, that the mind is restless and turbulent and obstinate, very strong, and to subdue it is more difficult than controlling the wind, he asks Arjuna, what is the process? How are you going to be able to control it? And Krishna acknowledges Arjuna's question actually. Krishna says that yes, it is very difficult to control the mind, but it is possible. And what does Krishna suggest? Krishna says it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Practice and detachment. Two very powerful tools Krishna is giving here. That what is this practice and what is this detachment? It's very easy to understand. Practice means that constantly bringing the mind back. The mind will constantly wander and go from one place to another, very flickering. But it's our duty to bring it back, to bring it back. And detachment helps us by controlling our senses also. But different yoga processes give you different processes by which to control the mind through this detachment and practice. But the Bhakti Yoga system is the most easiest and most beneficial. In fact, here Krishna gives the example. Krishna gives practice and detachment, and Bhakti Yoga gives the very easy process by which to do it. The mind is controlled through the senses, and vice versa. You can control the senses through the mind, and the Bhakti Yoga process allows you to attack the mind from both directions, directly through at it and through the senses. So this is the practice and this is the detachment. And where does it begin? The Bhakti Yoga process begins this practice of controlling the mind through mantra meditation. We've already seen in the previous sessions how mantra has two Sanskrit words. It's composed of two Sanskrit words, man and tra. Man means mind and tra means to deliver or to free. So these mantras are sound vibrations. They're specific sound vibrations that are meant to deliver the mind from being entangled in the constant bombardment of the senses information. It's meant to help us go beyond current perception and the previous and future perceptions. It's supposed to help us go into understanding more about the self beyond the body and the mind. So what is the process? It is mantra meditation, and it's by chanting this Hare Krishna mantra. So this is the practice. And what is the detachment? The detachment process is given as engaging the senses in spiritual progress, specifically engaging the senses towards always remembering this process of chanting this Hare Krishna mantra. So what is the process? Where does it begin in controlling the detachment process? How does it work? Well, it works beginning with the tongue. The tongue, if we're able to just control the tongue, naturally all other senses come under control. And you can see this by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Not only are we attacking the mind by focusing the mind on hearing the sound vibration, we're using the senses to be able to get to the mind. So by hearing the mantra and by vibrating it with our tongue, we're gradually coming to a stage where we're controlling the mind. And if you take it from another angle, what can we do with our senses outside of chanting this Hare Krishna mantra? Well, the Bhagavad Gita gives a lifestyle. It's not just simply a yoga text someone does or follows, 2 hours a day or 1 hour a week and then you do whatever throughout your whole life. It's a practical lifestyle manual. It helps you engineer your life in such a way that what will happen is that your life becomes a whole yoga process. So in other words, rather than just a couple of hours in the morning of your meditation or yoga, your whole life, your whole day, you can pull the benefits of that. So with the mantra meditation, if you're able to control your mind and control the senses, then throughout your whole day, you'll find that your activities, your consciousness, the way you deal, the attitude, the way you deal with people, all of these things is more catered towards spiritual advancement or becoming more conscious of the self and going beyond that as well. So this mantra meditation process is a very beneficial and very easy process to perform. And by chanting this Hare Krishna mantra and following the lifestyle of a Bhakti Yogi, it's very easy to be able to control the mind. And by controlling the mind and the senses, then it's very easy. Life becomes much more easy. So that's it for today. I'll just do a quick wrap up that we discussed a bit about how the mind and the senses are connected to each other, how the mind is considered to be the headquarters and the five senses are just grabbing information from all around it and feeding it to the mind. And the mind, with the help of our intelligence, is able to discern which one to take, which one to follow. And because of this constant accepting and rejection, our mind becomes a bit of a flickering instrument. It becomes very difficult for us to be able to control. So when we want to do something, then our mind generally flicks to another situation and makes us detour from where we actually want to head to. So by this practice of mantra meditation, we're able to immediately curb the mind's flickering tendency, to prevent it from going away from where we want to go. And by practicing this mantra meditation, gradually we overcome the mind. And by overcoming the mind, then we can gradually understand more about the self and actually realize the self beyond the body and the mind. And by doing so, then we can understand the self as the spirit soul, and that our tendency is to be able to serve. And by practicing this mantra meditation, we can understand in this spiritual realization how we can remain always blissful and happy. So thank you very much for listening today. It's been a pleasure to be able to share some realizations from the Bhagavad Gita. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, you can contact us on the website www.thehappyjiva.com. Otherwise, you can email us at info@thehappyjiva.com or our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And I'll leave it here for now, and we're going to have the kirtan. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thank you very much for joining us this week for our Kirtan program. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any more further questions or you want to inquire a bit more about Kirtan or programs with the Happy Jiva team, please contact us on the website at www.thehappyjiva.com and also by email at info@thehappyjiva.com. You can also contact us on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you very much for listening once again. Hare Krishna.